Heads up, female leaders, executives, and entrepreneurs. We have just opened enrollment for our next Renegade Accelerator. You can head to renegadeaccelerator.com to check out all of the information and apply.
At the time, there might have been things that were less risky and maybe more rational to do, but I think I just understood that relationship at the time, and you just have to take chances and take risks if you want to, I think, create interesting or great things.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step.
Just let go.
After recording nearly 300 episodes, I've gotten to the place where I can typically tell where a conversation is headed. Not this time. With Matt Lombardi, we kicked off the chat, and there was just a special vibe because we started to go deep fast in terms of conversation, and toward the end, I'm in full-on tears. So Matt is the founder of Beam. And Beam is a company I'm actually an investor in. It's a CBD company, and there are other products as well. I can honestly say I feel that their product, Dream, which is one of their sleep products, it saved me while entering into the world of motherhood. And it worked so well that I wanted to get involved. Got to know the two co-founders, Matt and Kevin, and I was in. These guys are salt of the earth. They're smart, they hustle, and they are doing big things. So the company is amazing. But we actually don't talk about the company that much in this conversation. Matt is a former athlete, professional athlete, and he kicks off with a why not now story that's just loaded with inspiration. There's heartbreak that we talk about and how that's converted, that adversity is turned into an asset. And we also talk about loss. And this was the area that I wasn't necessarily expecting to go to, but it became so profound and so impactful on me that I think about this conversation often. Matt is one of those individuals who lives his life with a lot of meaning and a lot of thought, a lot of philosophy that's put into action. And I'm excited for you to hear from him, and I'm so grateful that he joined me on the show and was open and honest about his journey. Matt, welcome to the Why Not Now show. Thank you so much for joining me. This is a treat, and in the spirit of Why Not Now, can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you asked yourself, why not now? We'll dissect that day, minute, hour, season, and kind of understand how you got through that delta from idea to action.
Yeah, well, first, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to finally do this with you. I guess to give some context to leading up, I think it was starting Beam, which is my startup that I co-founded with one of my best friends, Kevin. The quick backstory is just we were both former athletes. Kevin played baseball. I played hockey, played professionally for a little bit. And post sports, I just kind of navigated a quick corporate stint, about 7 or 8 months, and then realized I wanted to just do things that I was more passionate about. And a lot of it had to do with athletics and wellness and startups and being an entrepreneur. And long story short, I ended up starting a business with two people in Boston. That was a coaching platform that, teams like Boston College, where I played hockey, would use it as their operational platform essentially. And I did that for about 2 or 3 years. I decided to leave. I just wasn't really seeing eye to eye with my partners on that. And that was its own learning experience, just being at a young age and starting out, I guess, my entrepreneurial journey. And then right after that, I decided to start a business with my ex-fiance. She was also an athlete, and we had a passion to want to inspire young athletes. And we had built a business around empowering young female athletes at the time. And as that business and relationship was coming to an end, Kevin and I had started thinking about this idea, what eventually became Beam. And at the time, I had just gotten out of the relationship, was deciding to halt that business or stop it. I just thought in my head, oh gosh, do I really want to do this again? Start something from scratch. It's such a grind. It's hard. I would say technically coming out of 2 failed startups, obviously so many learnings baked into those and ultimately have served me really well. But I think that was definitely why not now moment where, I was essentially starting life over to a degree, just where, my professional and my personal life are all intertwined into one thing, and both of those things were ending. And, I remember just chatting with Kevin a lot about that. And, ultimately I decided to sell my engagement ring, and I used that money, and that was my half of starting Beam with Kevin. And I think layered into that was just like, why not now? I think it was easy to get sort of paralyzed and a little hesitant, just, thinking about, failure. Geez, maybe I should just go get a regular job and do that. But, that was definitely a moment where I, had to just, I think, stay true and connected to what I thought was passionate, what made sense to me, what my intuition and my gut was telling me. And I think that's definitely one of those why not now moments.
That's huge. I mean, the amount of dynamics and things in changing, huge aspects of life, emotionally, personally, business-wise, like everything was just up for probably debate on what was going to happen next, because everything sounds like it was really intertwined. We always talk about work-life integration, not separation, but that's like the epitome, right? Working and being that closely aligned in a relationship, but also business. So this moment, it's such an interesting point where you sold the engagement ring, and that was kind of the green light of this is the direction I'm going. And in my mind, I'm thinking you were kind of recommitting, like talk about commitment to you. And what a symbolism, like moment. What did it feel that way? Was there like this, like kind of almost visceral, physiological, okay, now I'm transferring my commitment this way? Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, in the moment, to be honest, I don't know that I connected the dots like that. I think in the moment, it probably just felt maybe not as a big of a deal or not as strong of a commitment. I think looking back, just to see what's gone on in the business the last 2.5, 3 years now, I think it's almost like I appreciate that part of the story. But I think one thing I've learned, maybe just generally speaking, but also just about myself, is just like, I know that I want to have the best life I possibly can. And one thing I've learned through hockey and entrepreneurism and starting business is just risk and reward go hand in hand. And I know that the life that I want to create and ultimately have, or I'm experiencing right now, risk goes along with that. I think a lot of times it's, people want to have a certain lifestyle or nice things, or to be, a founder, or to do all those things, but don't understand sometimes how these different things in life correlate in the relationship between certain elements. I mean, I think another one that I've realized too is people want to develop strength, whether it be, resilience or mental strength or perseverance. But usually the relationship is like, you need to struggle to gain those things. You don't just get strength by reading a book or studying it or talking to others. I think you actually have to experience those things. And same thing with, I think, creating a great life. You have to inherently just comes along with taking risks. You're going to fail. You're going to have adversities and challenges. And I think understanding the correlation between some of those things, I guess that's how I kind of look at that, is okay, like I want to still create this entrepreneurial path and journey for myself. And at the time, there might have been things that were less risky and maybe more rational to do. But I think I just understood that relationship at the time. And you just have to take chances and take risks if you want to, I think, create interesting or great things.
It's interesting to think about the moment you were in. At any point, did you stop and say, hey, is my head straight right now? Am I thinking? And maybe the answer is no. And because it was, and you knew it. But Did you ever feel in that moment, that why not now moment, which oftentimes is not 1 second, right? It's a phase, it's a brewing idea in your mind. Was there ever like, do I need to pause right now? Or was it very clear? No, this is the direction. Like, did you second guess a lot?
I didn't spend a whole lot of time on that, should I just go get a regular job? Should I do something that might be more, quote unquote rational? I just remember having a very quick dialogue with myself. But I think just for me, knowing my nature, I think one thing I'm a big believer in is if you can understand your nature and just match your life to it. I'm a big Ray Dalio fan, and I've heard him say that a few times. And I think I've known that about myself. I think that's why that was probably easy for me, is just understand your nature and match your life to it. And I think that's one way to really create happiness and progress. And I think I ultimately knew if I went and did something that was perceived as more rational, I don't know. I think I just knew ultimately I wouldn't be as happy. And I also knew like I could go do this with Kevin, and it's very realistic and actually more likely that we fail and we succeed. I think that's just the other thing that I've learned too, is just embrace failure as it's just to be expected, to fear it, but also accept it. I think it's just a given that you're going to have failures and things don't work out along the way. And so, yeah, it wasn't, for me, that wasn't a long drawn out process, just because I think at the time, had I been younger and had not gone through some of the experience I had gone through, I might have maybe had to have sat on that a little bit longer and really think about it and try to rationalize it and see what was logical. But I think I understood just how I was wired and what my nature was and what I wanted my life to be like.
That's so cool that you were, the self-actualization process had started before that. So you felt confident in, this wasn't a rebound per se into another direction with starting a business. It was, I love Ray as well. And I gifted everyone one year for the holidays his principles book. But you talked about struggle. And I think that's such an interesting topic, especially for entrepreneurs, or just, let's just say renegades in general, right? Anytime we innovate, do something different, new, adversity is going to be right there. And as an athlete and an entrepreneur, the struggle, it can be like a street fight every day. And if you're not on the verge of tears at least once a week, if not daily, then are you really giving it your all? Like, that's how it feels sometimes, to have a business.
Totally.
Do you find like this odd joy in the struggle? Because I imagine as a professional athlete and having trained in that type of intensity and performed, it's not new to you, right?
No, it is. And I definitely gravitate, like when I think of hockey, playing hockey at Boston College, the goal there is every year is to win a national championship. And if you don't, essentially it's a failure. And, I was fortunate to play in two teams that we won a national championship. And my freshman year, we played the national championship game and lost. And then my junior year, we didn't make playoffs at all. And my junior year in particular, my senior year, we won the national championship, and I was lucky to be one of the captains and had great teammates. And, we won a bunch of other trophies. I mean, it was the perfect ending to a senior year college career, obviously. But I look back, my junior year was really the year that I appreciate the most. It was my hardest. I found myself out of the lineup a lot. We had an insane freshman class come in, and for whatever reason, like the first part of the season, I struggled a lot. And at the same time, that's where I learned and grew and ultimately found myself finishing the year strong and being voted one of the captains for the next season. And as much as I love and obsessed with winning, when I think of my career at BC, I think of my junior year as probably one of the most valuable, or if not the one that I appreciate the most, just because of the challenges, what it forced me to do. And same thing with Beam. We're at a stage now where, we're up to about 20 full-time people on the team, a handful of contractors and agencies we work with. And it's a different machine than it was when it was just Kevin and I, or just Kevin and I and our first, 2, 3, 4, 5 employees, when, you're out there and you're struggling, you're grinding, and it's, like hand-to-hand combat. And as much as I love what we're doing now in the different phase and transition that we're in with managing a team and really scaling a business, I think, if we're able to get this to where we want to go, and I think I'll always probably look back and look at those first couple of years, first year and a half, as probably the most enjoyable, just because that's where things were really hard and they weren't easy, and no one really saw what was going on behind the scenes. And those are the things I think that I gravitate towards for sure, is just like that part of the journey. I think it's fun to be where we're at. It's just such a different business than it was 2 years ago, and what we had to do to essentially get it here. You really have to become obsessed with it. We kind of joke, but it's also, I think it's pretty accurate. We just say I feel like I've sold my soul to this. So is Kevin and, our team that's been here from the early days. So I think you have to have that mindset where you just embrace the the process of it all.
Real quick on the beam front, it's helped me so much with sleep, specifically as a new mom, as an entrepreneur, as a fairly high voltage person, I would say. I struggled after Lincoln was born. And when you find something that works, you just want to tell everybody. And now fast forward as an investor, I think about how someone gave me some advice. I think it might have been Tony Hsieh years ago, who we lost tragically this year. But he said, when I invest, I think of like a surfing situation. You've got your surfboard, and this may not have been his original thought and concept. So whoever it belongs to, if you're out there, I apologize. But it's great. So you've got your surfboard, that's the product, right? And or service. You've got your surfer, founder, co-founders, the humans, and you've got this wave, which is the trend and or dynamics within the industry. Something's going on outside that bigger picture, outside of the control of the surfer and the surfboard that's much bigger than them. And Tony always said, 99% of the time things are going to change anyway with the product or the business or service. Like what you think you're going to build is going to be different. But if that surfer can't handle the board and the wave and the board changing, then you better bet on the surfer. And with you and Kevin both being athletes, I just think it's almost as an investor kind of maybe a unfair advantage to know there's that grit and like you're gonna figure this out. And the fact that you two, what I've seen, fierce focus, it occurs to me, and I know, Matt, we don't know each other super well, but definitely have spent some time around each other, and I watch, and how do you maintain that focus, like just the ability, like you said, to become obsessed? You have to be, because in any given day you could shift gears and change directions in what you think is best for the business. There's
a lot of directions to go in. I think Kevin and I just always use the analogy, we're trying to win a championship, and there's a lot of what that might mean in business. And I think as a startup at some point, working towards an exit. I know I listened to the Super Coffee Brothers. We're in a similar, mindset and trajectory and goals as them. At some point that would be the end game. But I think what athletics taught us was that you really need to focus on the process and the results will come. And I think having a really deep understanding, I guess, in relationship to the process and what that entails is, sport really is just like, athletics is the ultimate metaphor for so many things in life and in business. And I think that's just the right mindset to have in business. And every single day, it's just focus on constant improvement, constant progress. And I think that allows a team or a company to stay really focused on things, and you have a mindset more on the process and what do we need to be doing each day, each week, each month, because you can get lost in sort of this like blizzard of stuff. There's so many things going on at once. And, Kevin shared a great analogy. I forget where he said he heard it, but he said, being a founder is kind of like you have 50 plates spinning in the air at once, and you can only keep 10 of them spinning, and you have to let, the other 40 or so drop and break and just kind of live with that and understand, like, how do I keep the most important things going? And that's one thing that just popped in my head with it too, is like understanding like what you can focus on and what you need to be driving, and what other things that, how to prioritize. Then there's just like the more higher level macro, just you have to make a lot of sacrifices. I don't know that I've ever heard someone who's become the best at what they've done, whether it be sports, business, artist, celebrity, anything, musician, where they haven't been so obsessed with the process and becoming as best as they possibly can be. But with that comes a lot of sacrifices around your social life, your personal life, things that you do, things that you don't do. And I don't know how to my total thoughts on sort of like work-life balance and the word balance and things like that. But, with Kevin and I think it's sort of like a gift and a curse. So obviously we want to make sure that we're healthy and happy, because if we don't have our health, we're not going to be good leaders and help drive the business. So we obviously don't believe in just burning the midnight oil 24/7. And I think that's not the right thing to do, obviously. But at the same time, I don't know that we'd be where we are if we weren't so monomaniacally focused on driving the business and, pushing the process forward and focusing on, the day to day and the things that we need to constantly be getting better at and driving the team now. I guess I can bundle all that up. You just have to become obsessed with the process and, what that entails.
First of all, I love the 50 plates and 40 you got to drop. It's like deciding which of those 40, see them on the ground, broken, shattered. I know. But it's so true. It's such a great analogy. And I think with literally today, especially, gosh, is it almost 2 years of the pandemic now? I mean, I forget, everybody says 1 year, and I'm like, no, it's however long we've been in this. The burnout is real. I have my eyes and ears and optics on both the corporate world as clients and the big entities, as well as startups and individuals. And it's across the board. You name it. It's real everywhere. And self-care is a thing, of course. I mean, this is not news. But also that obsession. Sometimes balancing, like, yeah, there are times last night and a lot of times I am on Slack at 11 because you know what? No one's going to hear back from me for 3 days if I don't answer at 11 because you know what I mean? It's like, and I was having this conversation with a woman, Julia Cheek, who's, gosh, her company, Everly Health, it's a $3 billion valuation right now. Like, they're just rocking, and there's no time to do anything for her except for her son, her family, and husband, and the business. Yeah. And so how do you manage that expectation with your team where, no, it is go time, yet we love you and care about you, and we realize how important it is to have your own time for mental and health. Yeah. And for me, I even struggle with balancing that with, the team too.
Yeah. You really start just to learn how things interact with each other. You need to be obsessed, and you need to work really hard, and you need to put the time in. And at the same time, you have to understand the relationship too, between putting time into something and also your health and your wellness. I mean, ultimately, again, if you don't have your health, if you don't have energy, your mental, physical energy, you're useless in the business. And so, we don't have a vacation policy. The team is welcome to take as, many and as often, breaks and vacations and days off as they need. Obviously, the expectation is that you communicate well and you don't leave any of your teammates hanging. And we try to, I would say Kevin and I probably aren't the best examples. We're trying to be better at leading by example with that as well. But you have to prioritize your health, just because if you don't have that, you have to understand, you can go, but it's something you actually might not be as effective, working more hours, but burning yourself out. So
totally.
I think there's that thing that we're, and also, mind you, we're a health and wellness company. We obviously are very passionate and take health and wellness and everything very seriously. So we try to really prioritize that with our team. It's a combination. I don't know. I guess you can call it maybe work-life balance, but maybe it's more for me. I look at it more just like recovery. Just if you're training physically, you have to bake in recovery days, or else you just burn yourself out. I've done that in hockey where I've trained too hard and I didn't give myself enough time to recover, and I felt the effects physically in my performance, how that negatively impacted me. So for me, this is more, transition from hockey to this. I needed to figure out how to, my brain is my muscle now. It's not my body anymore. And so I need to figure that out. And it's the same thing though. You need to give your brain a rest. If anything, I've been almost shocked how the feeling of mental fatigue, what that's like. And it's a good cue as to when I need to. The same thing, just physically, you need to let your brain rest. You need to let your body rest. So again, it's just understanding that relationship of how far you can push it, and then knowing when to recover, just like an athlete. I think long gone are the days of people just thinking, I need to go 24/7, burn the midnight oil. It's heroic to do that. It's actually stupid to do that. You won't be at your best if you don't recover.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us.
I love the analogy, again, back to physical exertion and activity in sports. And recovery. Look at it like that. This literally will not work. This formula does not work if you don't. I think of just the mental strength and adversity we go through, not only as entrepreneurs, but just in general when you're obsessed with something so much. And then you have these outside curveballs. We talk a lot on the show about adversity being an asset and how if it's leveraged hard enough, it can totally be a springboard. But there's a saying that when one door opens, another closes, but there's hell in the hallway. Do you have any of those hell in the hallway moments where this is tough, this is painful, yet there is an asset somewhere in here?
I have varying degrees of that. There's so many just challenging things just in Beam, manufacturing challenges. We're trying to launch something and it just goes total opposite than what the plan was. Teammates not working out or strategies failing. Per se, I mentioned I used to be engaged and getting out of that. That obviously, at the time is a tough transition in general. Kevin and I have just been through a lot as friends and as business partners. And, I often say this is why I love him so much. We've gone through so many shared experiences. He really helped me figure out sort of life post-engagement, not just starting the business, but just personally. And then, we launched Beam, things are moving, it's chaotic. It's everything you obviously would think an early stage company is. And we're probably getting like right to the point where, I think both of our parents are kind of like, I don't know what the hell they're doing, but I think it's like made enough progress. I'm not totally worried about them anymore. I think, the first few months they were just like, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what they're selling, but we'll support them. Then I think they started to see, okay, like they're onto something. There's some traction. There's something going on there. We're still really early and still really hard, but then life can hit you in the head with a brick sometimes. And, I went through something, and I just kind of looped Kevin into this because we're so attached to the hip, but I had one of those days I think you just don't ever expect would happen where, Kevin and I were out for a run one afternoon. We came back to his apartment. We were going to shower. We had a pop-up store in Seaport in Boston. We're going to go close the store. And I look at my phone and I have all these text messages and calls from my godfather, my dad's best friend. And, one of my sisters if you heard from dad, hadn't heard from him in a while. And, I unfortunately just got horrible news that I just lost my dad. I remember just Uncle Elmo, my godfather, calling me and telling me about it. And I, peel myself off the ground. I go over to Kevin, he just gives me a big bear hug and holds me for a while. And that it's, I guess like that's hard to like totally digest and put that in the context, but that's just one of those things that I think what I learned from that is like, nothing's ever going to hurt me like more than that did. And so, I remember, shortly after that, we were fundraising, and Obvious Ventures, I know we've mentioned to you, they led, they've been awesome for us. They've been, leading the way with funding for us. I remember the first time one of their partners came and flew in and met us in Boston. And gosh, this is probably just like 2 or 3 weeks after everything. And, just finished the services, and he's sitting there, and he's, they love that we're athletes. They love that we have traction and all these things. And, he, kind of, I think, I don't know exactly how he worded, but essentially was like, why should we bet on you guys? Like, how do we know you're going to have the grit to like stick this out? Like, you're in a hard industry. There's a lot of regulatory constraints. It's new. It's, very gray. There's a lot of people in the space right now. And honestly, we kind of looked at each other. Honestly, both of you just started crying and just like, this is just what happened to me, to us. And, like, you're an idiot if you don't bet on us. Like, if you think I think we'll be able to, like, we just went through this thing, the fact that, we're going to have a slow month of sales, or we're going to have manufacturing challenges. We're going to have like normal just startup stuff that happens. Having to have dealt with this, that all just seems like table stakes. Those are just whatever. We'll figure that stuff out. And so I guess it's like going through that, like for me, my biggest learning from it, that was 2 years ago. So it's still, as much as it feels like it was yesterday, I also feel like it's been so long since it happened. So it's a weird combination of feeling like it's really fresh, and it's also just been, my reality and part of my life now for a bit. But I guess for me, the two things, like the first year I really looked at is just unshakable became my mindset. And it's like, I just have to figure out, like, I still have to create the life that I want to create. And how do you do that when you just are dealt such a hard blow? And learning how to do that first 12 months, and just to go back and continue doing what I was passionate about and love doing, which is building this business with Kevin and the team. It just taught me a lot. It really, there's going to be more hard stuff. There's going to be more tragedies in my life. There's going to be more personal hardships I go through. I'm sure that's just life. And there's obviously going to be hard things that we go through with Beam. It just taught me just to be unshakable and just to keep finding a way to move forward. And there's always a way to do that. I guess I'm kind of dorky in that sense. Like I just sort of like break things down so it makes sense in my head. So that was sort of like year one of it. And year two of it really became, can I still look at life and say life is beautiful? And that was probably a more harder thing to get to, because, it was an accident. It was sort of like a freak thing. It was totally unexpected, so there's parts of it that make me angry. There's parts of it that are obviously still upsetting. But, can I still look at that and just love the time that I had with my dad and love how much he was an entrepreneur? Like, I don't know that I'd be one without him or with his support. And just to appreciate, those hard things like we're talking about. I think, I mentioned earlier, I think everybody wants to be strong and everybody wants to be tough and have courage. Like I haven't found a way to do that without struggling. Our good friend Ray always says, learn to struggle well. And so I think that's what's been interesting, I guess, like the last 12 months of it, the year or two of it all, just dealing with it is just, life is beautiful, and having the ability to look at all challenges that you deal with, even though as much as they might suck and they're on different wavelengths of how they impact you, just that's life. And that's what makes life interesting, is that you go through this insane journey, up and downs. And so I guess just to bring that back is just being able to embrace any kind of struggle is just a natural part of life, makes it easier to go through those things. I think when you don't understand that this is just life and this is what happens in life, it makes it harder. And you wonder, why is this happening to me? And life is, unfair and life sucks. I think if you just embrace fear, you embrace challenges, you embrace hardships, it just completely changes your approach and how you handle those things.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that, and the incredible loss and being knocked to your knees like that. I started crying over here because I'm so honored that you and Kevin have a relationship where he, that just to even be slightly involved in your lives, but that connection and that bond is just unmatched, right? It's incredible. That's what life's all about. Like, that to me was the most beautiful. I love your ability to like break things down. And you clearly are. I'm like over here just crying. You clearly.
I was holding back mine.
Thank you for sharing and being willing. It's not every day that people open up and share those moments. I think your level of self-awareness and that leads to self-actualization, according to Bruce Lee, is just incredible. Like, to be able to now compartmentalize and say, okay, that was your one. And then just I can see you sitting there with obvious ventures and being like, dude, like this is yours to lose. And when you look at that question, can I still say life is beautiful? And we're a couple years out now, right? Is it? Mm-hmm. Does that answer change daily, or are you feel like you've got a certain lean on it?
I don't know that I'd say I have it totally figured out. I think, to be honest and transparent, like, it's still obviously something that I, deal with, and I have my own ways of processing and figuring out. I guess like one thing I struggle with is, I went through my engagement, and it was just, I look at that, I'm like, oh, things happen for a reason. What an easy phrase to apply to that. And Kevin and I always say too, like, we definitely wouldn't have Beam had I not gone through sort of this whole experience that was. And, I look at this and I almost think like it's just such a stupid phrase to say when I think of my dad. It's like this, things happen for a reason. Like, I didn't need that to happen to, I could learn strength and grit and, through other challenges. And maybe that's, I don't know, maybe that's short-sighted of me to say. I think that's where I can understand too. Like, I'm not perfect in everything that I think in high process stuff, but as I work through things, maybe there's a world where I need to look at that differently. But for me, the idea just to like embrace life is beautiful. Generally, that I've accepted that, because I guess what it does is it forces me to focus on, I can think about what actually happened. I can think about that day when I got the call. I can think about going through the services and like the stuff that really makes me mad or sad. There's a difference, I guess, between sad and missing my dad and feeling sort of like hopeless, angry, upset, that kind of sad. And so I guess that forces me to focus more on, I appreciated the time that I did have with my dad. And even though it was way too short of a time, and I'd love to be sharing what's going on right now in my life and business and things, and, having him here in the flesh with me to have these conversations would be amazing. I can still just think like how appreciative I am just to have had him as a dad. And I think that it makes me focus more on that than the stuff that makes me angry or upset in a different kind of way. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, like, I have, like, I don't just say that as like a pep talk to myself either. I think that was a challenge with this. Can I actually say that and can I actually believe it? Or am I just saying this as like a, because it sounds good and maybe I should believe it, but I don't actually. And I think I try to generally do a pretty good job of like really embracing that. And I think it comes out in the fact that I can continue trying to be who I want to be and have the relationships I want to have and go about things the way that I want to go about things. And the other thing with it too is just, I think like through hockey and just like dealing with different stuff and starting a business and my dad and all these different things, is one thing that kind of just like keeps me ticking and moving forward too, is like, how do I approach stuff or do things so that hopefully it impacts someone else's journey? And that's why, I haven't talked about it on something like this, and I appreciate sharing it with you just because it is part of my story, my journey. And I don't know that someone has to go, no, you don't have to literally go through things that I've gone through, but hopefully in how I've gone about that it helps inspire someone else's journey, whether it's whatever challenge you're going through. I had a few of my just really close friends that had some really personal stuff going on at the time. And they'd come up to me just after the services and just said, "Hey, I've been really struggling with this in my own life. And just watching how you handled and dealt with this is just inspiring. It's like totally helped me think about how I'm doing this." And like, that meant the world to me. Like that gave me the energy, I guess, just to keep moving forward. And to, I guess, think about, trying to be unshakable and what that meant. And now trying to figure out, no matter what you're going through, like life can still be beautiful if you choose to look at it through that lens.
I think of, that saying, we learn what we need to teach, and sharing and storytelling can really, accelerate the process of people healing, innovating their lives, growth, learning, and leveraging adversity and turning it into an asset, or it just is an asset in disguise until we are able to spot it. I guarantee people listening right now are the beneficiaries of that asset, and thank you. And so, yeah, it means a lot that you would share that. I have so many additional questions. I know that we're like, gosh, I have an area that I'd love to just touch on because I'm so curious of your thoughts. It is a bit of a turn. Imposter syndrome. What does that mean to you? When people use that term, what do you think? And do you experience it? If so, how do you deal with it?
Kevin, I still say like, we don't know what the hell we're doing. I think there's a couple things. I mean, the first thought is just to embrace, like, you don't really know, no idea. You don't know if a good idea is a good idea until you actually go out and do it. And all ideas suck and all ideas aren't good until you actually go out and do it. And then you prove that it's a good idea. I don't know that the way that we're leading or the way the strategies we're coming up with or the things that we're implementing in Beam, I don't know if those are the right things to be doing. So I think it's one, you should embrace that. You should understand that. And then on the other side of it is probably one of the most important things I've figured out how to do is just to really understand sort of like your conscious and subconscious thoughts going on in your head. And I think a lot of those initial things, am I worthy of this? Am I good enough to do this? Do I even know what I'm doing? I think subconsciously those pop into our head. And if you're not really aware of it, you don't really just absorb those and realize that those are just naturally things that occur in everybody's head. I think the difference is, with maybe high performers is just they acknowledge that pops in their head and they can kind of just more react to the emotions and embrace emotions and then realize, okay, is this really a big deal? Is it not a big deal? And just kind of process it versus just reacting purely on those emotions, or I guess what we're kind of talking about is imposter syndrome. So for me, I would just say it definitely exists. I think it's a natural thing that people have, just the way our brains are hardwired. That's a whole nother conversation. But so I think you just embrace that. You realize that some of that, there's probably truth to a lot of those things. You probably don't know what you're doing, but you don't know that you don't know until you actually go out and do it. And then I think the more aware you can be of when those things are actually happening and sort of digest them and react to them more thoughtfully versus just reacting based on emotion probably helps mitigate that. But I think, gosh, any either athlete or entrepreneur I've talked to definitely goes through periods, you can have confidence and conviction in yourself, but you definitely go through times when, you have fear and emotions and negativity pops in your head.
We can almost use that phrase and get it can become semantics, like just disconnect. But that persistent inability to believe that your success is, not deserved or not created by your own efforts and skills. There's a narrative that women struggle with it more or have it more. And first of all, I don't subscribe to that. There's very little research that's been done on it. There's more over the last decade or so, but it actually indicates that men might even experience it more. They just show it differently and or deal with it differently. And so I'm kind of wanting to, really have a more modern conversation around this is not this is not a gender thing. This is a culture. This is culture. It is experience thing. It's anyway. So I was just curious, especially with your background. Okay, 2 quick questions, and I might be able to wrap it up in 2 minutes in order to keep us on time here. Do you journal or meditate, or how do you keep your mind healthy and so self-reflective and it seems like you have a pretty good outlook on things?
Yeah, as much as I talked about you need to recover, for me, journaling and meditating and reading and learning, for me, are just as equally as important to how getting my brain to function, operate so that I can be effective in things that I do, not just in business, but in my relationships and elsewhere. Yeah, and it's I'm not 100% perfect on it, just because again, at the same time, sometimes I get up and Slack is buzzing and emails and Kevin's calling me and all these things, and I become reactive to the day, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and before I know it, it's 3 PM and I have just been working and haven't really had a chance to have a thought for myself. But that's also just the nature of things. Sometimes I try to really be disciplined, and sometimes it just requires getting up a little earlier before that happens. But yeah, for me, I love journaling, just taking notes on things that I'm reading. Right now I'm reading Courage is Calling by Ryan Holiday's new book, which is really interesting and talks a lot. I think a lot of those things just around, fear and imposter syndrome. I think your mind running amok about things like that. And then I have sort of just a simple meditation process that I go through. And for me, it's just about calming my mind and, visualizing different things and thinking through different things. And gosh, I feel there's a very direct correlation when I am doing that very consistently to when I feel like I'm performing my best. And so it's just, for me, it's it's a crucial part of my routine.
It's motivating for someone who's obsessed about doing well. Yeah, it's very motivating to do it. So 2 quick areas. Handstands. Now, I want to learn how to do handstands, but walking. I used to be in gymnastics when I was younger and dance and stuff, and I consider myself capable of figuring this out once and for all, not against a wall. What do you got for me? Will you be my handstand mentor?
Happy to be.
And you have to go follow Matt on Instagram, and you can see what I'm talking about.
So when we started Beam, CrossFit was a community we really just got integrated deep into, just because Kevin and I just enjoyed going to CrossFit classes. I had never really gotten into it. It's very similar to hockey training, I would say. But when I started following a program that some of the athletes that we were working with were doing, meaning their weights, their workouts. I remember Kevin, it was probably February, and I have an obsessive personality, as you can probably have told. So when I do something, I have to do everything. So I started following this program, and I had to do all the nuts and bolts. And again, this was designed for a CrossFit athlete trying to train for the game. So essentially they're working out all day long. So I'm going to my CrossFit gym twice a day. The people at the gym think I'm bizarre. And then there was often swimming. So then I had to go join somewhere that had a pool. And I remember him calling me I don't know, maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock at night in February, in the middle of winter in Boston. And he's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I'm just leaving the pool." He's like, "What do you mean you're leaving the pool?" I was like, there was a swimming workout today I had to do. He's like, "Didn't you already go to the gym twice today?" And I was like, "Yeah, but there was swimming. I had to go finish the swimming." He's like, "Please stop. We're right in the thick of launching our business." He's like, "I don't need you to get sick. You're being an idiot. Just, you don't need to swim. You're not training for anything. Just knock it off." But anyways, to back that into handstands, so a lot of the workouts would have handstand walks and all these things that I couldn't do at the time. So really it really just became practice. I would, they'd have workouts with 50-foot, 100-foot handstands, and, might take a normal as just one element of the workout. But
what does that mean? A 50?
Walking 100 feet in handstand walking. And I could probably just go 2 or 3 feet at a time before falling. And it just anything, it's just one of those things. That's why CrossFit has been so interesting to me. It's really it's proof of concept that practice is the ultimate way to develop skill. It really is I just practiced and practiced and practiced. I don't have any special technique or anything other than
do you start against a wall?
There's times just when practicing, but when the workout had handstand walks in it, I would just do it. And it might take me 40 minutes to do the workout, and it's taking other, people that are proficient at it 8 minutes.
Gotcha.
I just kind of stuck with it. So just over time, but there's definitely a few tricks, just how to think about your core and positioning, and you can definitely work on developing so much strength just by holding against the wall or walking into a wall and leaning up against it and things like that. But
do you look at the ground? Or because when you're walking, I've seen these videos and I always kind of heard, no, keep your head straight, like you should be looking straight ahead. But don't you have to look at the ground in order to see where you're going? If you don't look up and look where you're walking, this is supposed to be a more better posture, aligned. Yeah. But I think naturally, like I find it hard. I need to look where I'm going. I'm probably talking way too much about this. No, I'm actually just, I'm going to follow up. This is a takeaway. I commit to following up. We'll see if that's worth, any additional exposure on that, what happens there. Final question here. So let's take you back to that point when you're selling this engagement ring and you're green lighting this other commitment, right? If you were to say something to yourself in that moment, to go back and say something, what would you say?
I think I would say something along the lines of, I think maybe I touched on it earlier and this is kind of resonating with me now. It's just like, if you want to have the life that you want to have, risk and reward go hand in hand. I just think when you understand that, it makes the idea of taking on risk a little bit more digestible, because it's kind of like, it kind of calls yourself out. It's like, do I really want these things? Am I really willing to risk it to go do those things? I think there's great things, just, looking back, you can see how the dots connect. It's hard to see at the time, and trust your gut and your intuition, all those things. But just think of the things that you want. Again, I talked about strength and struggling go hand in hand. There's so many other things you can say, what do I want? And then what are those things that I need to understand go hand in hand? And usually the other thing, the other side, isn't fun to go through. But to understand, like, if I want this, I have to understand like what that incorporates me having to go through or to embrace. Because I think when you don't think of that relationship, it's, you think, I want these things, and you think of all the risks, but it's like, no, like that actually, if I want to do those things, like I have to just be willing to accept that. And then it'll just allow yourself to say, I'm not willing to do that, or I am willing to do that. And I think that's, at the time, I didn't probably have that exact conversation. So that's why I think if I could go back now and do that, I would probably be a little bit more direct about understanding that. I think that was going on in my head. I didn't really know it at the time, but I think that's when I look at that, it's just, that's what I would say.
That's good. It's, if you want something you've never had, you have to do something you've never done, right? And go somewhere you've never been. That's another way to say it. And that's risky, and that's uncomfortable, and that's, it's like, thank you so much for sharing and for joining. I could keep going for a long, long time. And Kevin, if you're listening, you're next for the hot seat, so get ready. I'm really honored to be on this ride with y'all. Now that I've been in Texas for 5 months, I can say y'all, right? So thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for being on the journey with us and supporting us the way you have. Just, I guess it's only been 6-7 months now, but you've been great, and we've appreciated everything that you've helped us with and building the relationship with us.
Likewise. Go check out Beam, especially if you're struggling with sleep or focus or anything. So we'll continue this journey.
Awesome. Thanks, Amy.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your why not now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?